the 13th of June, the 18th day of Sivan, I believe. I'm almost sure that is the day. Today's special breakfast and class graciously sponsored by Mrs. Marlene Gore, here present, on the occasion of the 12th month of the passing of her beloved mother, Rachel Bat Aisha Be Yosef. Yeh Ratzon, that to the power of the Berachot and the learning of today, her neshama will have an aliyah in Gan Eden. Amen. Additionally, today's class graciously dedicated by Eyal David Zohar and family, Le'ilui Nishmat, his beloved father, Reuben Nasir Ben Monir, Alav Shalom. Additionally, today's class dedicated Le'ilui Nishmat, Abraham Yitzhak Ben Tzvi, Alav Shalom. Yeh Ratzon, that through all the power of our Torah learning, all the neshamot will be elevated in Gan Eden. Amen. Needless to say that we cannot start today's class without thinking of what's happening in Eretz Israel. Obviously, the situation is very delicate, very sensitive. We are following closely what's happening there. And Be'ezat Hashem, we hope and pray that we only hear Besurot Tovot, and once and for all, our sworn enemies will be eradicated. It's not the first time that Iran attempts against the Jewish people. We went back to the time of Ahashverosh and Haman and company. That was round 1 or 2, maybe. But now I hope and pray that this is the final round, and this is basically the stepping stone on Mashiach's arrival, as it's written in the Sefarim HaKedoshim, Yavo Melech Paras, prior to Mashiach's arrival. One of the final confrontations of the Jewish people will be with the kingdom of Persia. That's exactly the language that it says. Also, in this week's Torah portion, the Torah talks about the topic of war. The parasha of today, Parasha Be'alotecha. I'll open the pasuk for you very quickly. I'm just going to read it. And also, nothing is by coincidence, but everyone knows that the name of this mission is connected to a pasuk in the Torah. The pasuk says, Hem'am kelavi yakum. The Torah compares the Jewish people compared to a lion cub. That's the meaning of kelavi. Kelavi means a baby lion, but it says ka'ari yakum. In other words, that even though it may appear to be calm, small, and tame, but that's an inner type of behavioral pattern that the lion had, and that's why there is a Gemara that says, halakha that says, that ari mu'ad le'olam. A lion is forever guilty. In an ox, for example, an ox, there is shor tam, shor mu'ad. Different types of animalistic behavior. Tam is calm, doesn't really gore, occasionally gores. Shor mu'ad, he became a frequent offender. In the lion, is considered a frequent offender forever. And that's something that, compared to what's happening to Am Israel, and everybody saw the note of Netanyahu that put in the Kotel, actually he put this pasuk, Hem'am kelavi yakum. Sure. Now, we don't want to go talks about the politics, because that's not the place nor the moment. Who am I to discuss Israeli politics? They are so confusing that better say, I don't know. But if you read between the lines, a lot of things were happening in Israel in the last few days that send really mixed messages to the entire world, including to the Jewish people. So the question is, what can we do about Israel's situation? So our Hachamim, utilizing the eternal lessons of our Torah HaKedosha. They gave us already in the past, different strategies and different weapons of mass destruction. Because at the end of the day, if the threat against Bnei Israel and Am Israel in Eretz Israel, I just heard Hacham Ishak Yosef went to give Hizuk in France yesterday, and I think he was getting ready back to go to Israel. They turned don't go because the airport is shut down for a few days. So the flight, I think, made a U-turn and went to Brooklyn. So the rabbi unexpectedly now is spending Shabbat in Brooklyn unexpectedly. I even had the pictures from the rabbi sitting in the airplane. Okay, this is what's happening in the world today. I'm sure the Brooklyn community is very happy and excited that the great rabbi is by them, but would have wished that we can organize a visit to Florida, come spend a day with us. But obviously, this is the reality of what's happening today. And I'm sure that we all have relatives or friends and acquaintances, and the first thing they did was cancel the school, avoid public gathering, prepare yourself, have the miklatim ready. Obviously, as Yehudim, we understand that we need to make our basic ishtadlut, but the only way that an enemy can be defeated is only the way the Haftarah of this Shabbat, not last Shabbat, not next Shabbat, this Shabbat. Everything happens by divine providence. If you look at the Haftarah of tomorrow that the Jewish world will read, is the very, very famous Haftarah of Zechariah HaNavi. And at the end of the Haftarah, the Pasuk says, Lo behail velo bekoach kim beruchi amar Hashem sevakot. The Navi says, prior to Mashiach's arrival, that's what the prophecy of Zechariah Navi is the same Zechariah Navi that we quoted him every time that there is a Ta'anit Sibur, every time that there is a public fast day. And the Shabbat before the public fast day, we announce Soma Revi'i, Besoma Hamishi, Besoma Shevi'i, Besoma Asiri, Yafechu Lebet Yehuda, Lesason Ulsimcha. The Navi Zechariah says, all these fast days connected to calamities and tragedies that affected the Jewish people will be reversed into joy and happiness. So that Zechariah Navi is the same Zechariah Navi of tomorrow's Haftarah. And it says, Lo behail velo bekoach, not with might and not with strength, kim beruchi, but with my spirit, amar Hashem sevakot. In other words, the driver of the war is Akadosh Baruch Hu. We have a pasuk in the book of Tehillim that says, attributed to Shlomo HaMelech, very known pasuk, Im Hashem lo yibne bayit, shav amlu bonav bo, Im Hashem lo yishmor ir, shav shakad shomer. Thank you for the echo. But the pasuk says, no, I talk and I have echo, like, Freddy, there is echo in the recording. Hazako Baruch. No, he's an expert in Pesukim. Ask him, test him afterwards, not in public. Hazako Baruch. Hazak. So it says the following. If God does not build a home, the builder is wasting his time. That's the meaning of Shav Shakat. For nothing, the guard is guarding. In other words, if Hashem, God, does not keep a watchful eye on the city, you can have the best bitachon team. You can have the most sophisticated cameras and detectors and whatever you may want. If Akadosh Baruch Hu turns his head away, every achana, every preparation becomes irrelevant. Obviously, we live in a physical world and we must make ishtadlut. Ishtadlut is a requirement. Making an effort is mandatory. You got to make a keli for the protection and the beracha to come. Now, obviously, even if someone wants to go to Israel to help, there is no way to get to Israel unless you land in Egypt, you go to Rafah, you go to Gaza, and from Gaza you make a U-turn and you come to Netivot, Kiryat Malachi, and wherever it may be. So Metziut is no one is going anywhere. Ottaba, right? Thank you. Okay, so whatever a geographical location you will find, but I don't see anybody packing and leaving now. Obviously, it's Erev Shabbat Kodesh, but bottom line is that to help Israel, we can do it from here. And I already sent an email before I came to the class today to the Kahal. I will share it via WhatsApp for those registered to our classes. First of all, and I'm going to say what the email basically says, that there are three areas in life that Am Israel needs to reinforce. And I'm not saying only because there is always good to reinforce. The way the Gemara writes, Hakol Serichim Hizuk. Everything needs reinforcement. But when we activate the reinforcement and we have the kavanah for the zehut of the soldiers, for the zehut of the hostages to come back alive, for the zehut that the remains are buried. I don't want to think about the remains. But you know, in the prayers, we are already including the remains. Because the remains are there. What do you think? They give the care and attention like the Hevra Kadisha does? I don't want to even think about it. But the remains also, they need to rest, so to speak. And obviously, our soldiers in the front line, we don't know what kind of sakana they are, but our rabbis tell us a few things. First of all, we have the very famous statement, which is found in a few places with small variations, but the bottom line is that says as follows: Utshuva utfilah uzdaka, the power of repentance, the power of prayer, tehillim, prayer, Torah learning, etc., uzdaka, and giving charity, ma'avirin et roa hagezera, have the power to reverse the decree. So war is a decree. Like it or not, war is a decree. Like yesterday's airplane. Have you heard that one fellow survived? How? Don't ask me. Don't ask me. I don't need to know the news. I know one thing. One fellow survived. You don't understand. Over 200 perished. And the plane was not even 100 feet. It was in an angle and Haz v'shalom. We don't know details. But look, one fellow survived. Obviously got hurt, wounded, but survived. God forbid, that's better than whatever happened to the remaining 241 passengers and crew. God forbid. But there is one thing that we have an opportunity to do all together. Besides our prayers and our charity is connected to Shabbat Kodesh. Shabbat comes, what does it say? Imaten shomrim nerot shel Shabbat, ani madlik lachem nerot shel Sion. Observing the Shabbat, it brings protection and salvation. Is something that we say every Shabbat night in our prayers, in the Arvit prayers, and also in the Amidah, and Shabbat morning in the Kiddush, the famous pasuk that says, "Beshameru bnei Israel et Shabbat, la'asot et Shabbat." The concept of bnei Israel will observe the Shabbat, will protect the Shabbat, will celebrate and honor the Shabbat, and then the pasuk says, "La'asot et Shabbat," to create the Shabbat, to make the Shabbat. What does it mean that I make the Shabbat? It means cooking for Shabbat. It means taking a haircut or taking a shower for Shabbat, or dressing nicely lichvot Shabbat Kodesh. Obviously, all of the above could be. But you know what la'asot et Shabbat means? You create the day of the Shabbat. Nobody else. I cannot do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. What does it mean, do it for yourself? Take away from the whole and turn it into Shabbat. Meaning to say, receive the Shabbat a few minutes earlier. Also, this goes to the holy women. If candle lighting tonight is at 7:55, light at 7:50. If the earliest candle lighting, actually, I'm not going to say the next one, because the earliest candle lighting, you're going to do it before. Believe me, once you do the early candle lighting, you already gain 50 minutes. Because the earliest candle lighting in Miami is 7:05. Regular candle lighting, 7:55. So you gain 50 minutes, Hazako Baruch. But for those of us that will receive Shabbat at a regular time lighting tonight is 7:55. Guess what? Do it 7:50. So you make 5 minutes of Friday, they turn into the Shabbat. That's the idea of La'asot et Shabbat. The same thing applies at the end of Shabbat. Let's say Shabbat finishes tomorrow at 8:55, 8:53, I don't recall exactly the time. Okay. So if you leave the synagogue 5 minutes later, Nishgaferlach, if the Hazan sang a beautiful prayer, don't run. That's the idea of La'asot et Shabbat. There is a famous song, many beautiful songs about Shabbat, but there is one famous song, especially traditionally sang by the Sephardic Pismonim, that says, Ki Yishmera Shabbat El Yishmereni Ot Hi Le'olmei Ad Beno Ubeni. This is a very, very famous song that says, Ki Yishmera Shabbat, in the merit of watching the Shabbat Kodesh, El Yishmereni, God will protect us. And don't ask me questions about the war in Israel. Because somebody may say, how can you fly a plane? How can you go? Forget about it. Those are not questions for this class. The Hakamim in Israel know what they are doing. And there is definitely a matter of Pikuach Nefesh, Habali Orgecha, Shkem Lehorgo. So we're not here to debate the halachic ramification of war on Shabbat. Actually, remember the famous time of Yoshua, that when the Jewish people were about to engage in war to conquer Eretz Israel, it was Erev Shabbat. So what did Yoshua do? Stop the sun and the moon for a day and a half. Shush. Shemesh v'giv'on dom be'yareach be'emek hayalon. That happened on Gimal Tammuz, the third day of Tammuz. Sure. Why do you have to do that? He says, because I have a mitzvah to conquer Eretz Israel. How can I do it? You understand? So don't bring me halachic questions because I'm not equipped to give you all the halachic answers. But definitely we cannot forget the pasuk that says, "Et Sara hi leYaakov." It's a very difficult and challenging moment to Am Israel. U'mimene yibashea. And from the hardship and the war and the suffering, the redemption will come. So don't despair about what's happening in Eretz Israel. It is concerning, sure, because it has a side effect, ramifications all over the world. But there is nothing, the way the Mishnah writes in Masechet Sotah. The Mishnah in Masechet Sotah discusses many events, many matters. Like somebody said to me yesterday night, talking, and he said, guess what? A good thing came out of the war, of this attack from Israel. Number one, we are all praying, and other matters that were planned for the city of Tel Aviv tomorrow, Baruch Hashem, they had been cancelled. Thank God. And many matters set up for Shabbat Kodesh were also cancelled. So there is a lot of goodness coming around. If you look at it from that way, you may say you need a war to change that. Regretfully, yes. When the patient is in danger, you desecrate the Shabbat and you do whatever you need to do. I don't want to go into further because I want to concentrate it on a positive concept. But as I said before, each one should take a few moments, read a few chapters of Tehillim, give some charity, learn Torah, which Baruch Hashem we are learning, and in your personal and private prayers, add all these needs for Am Israel, because at the end of the day, the way the Gemara writes and it says, Yerushalayim oro shel olam. Yerushalayim is the center of the world. Whatever happens in Eretz Israel has a direct effect in Am Israel. So with all that being said, so I believe that I quoted the pasuk from Zechariah HaNavi in this week's Torah portion. There is also so many topics in this week's parasha that you don't even know where to start from, right? I'd like to go back to a topic that I did not discuss yesterday due to the fact that we were discussing about a different other topics, and a topic that it's connected to every day of our life, but specifically connected to Shabbat Kodesh. And why do I say Shabbat Kodesh? Because it has to do with the topic of Mayim Aharonim. Mayim Aharonim Choba. Mayim Aharonim Choba is based on the Gemara in Masechet Hulin. We know that there are three types of washing in halakha, especially when it comes to eating bread. You have number one, Mayim Rishonim. You have the concept of bread, washing for hamotzi bread. You wash for bread hamotzi, you make netilat yadayim. That's number one. That's Mayim Rishonim. Then you have Mayim Ensaim, the middle of the water, or the water of the middle rather, that is connected to separate between fish and meat. The Halakha discusses this clearly, that is suggested. It's not mandatory, but it's suggested that after the person finished eating meat, fish rather, you rinse your mouth, you drink something, you eat something, and many are pious enough. They get up from the chair, they go to the sink, and they wash the fingertips, so to speak, and they rinse their mouth. Many of us do it, usually whenever we have fish and meat on the same meal. And usually in my particular case, I barely have a fish and meat on the same meal, except Shabbat. Shabbat, we have fish. Ibn Shai writes that there is a concept of eating fish on Shabbat because fish is the animal or the creation that is closest to sanctity after humans. First come a human, then comes fish. Why? Because the fish lives in the water. There is a constant flow of purity that affects the fish. Obviously, like the mikveh, we're not talking about the non-kosher fish. Obviously, we're talking about the kosher fish. The Mishai discusses at length, but it's fine. Some people eat, some people don't eat. We're not debating if you should eat or what fish you should eat. That's not for today. But there is the third washing of the hands, which is called Mayim Aharonim. And usually we say the words Mayim Aharonim Choba. Now, what is the meaning of the word Choba? So if we ask the audience, what is the meaning of the word Choba? Mandatory. Mandatory. Obligation. Okay? Hazako Baruch. In the deeper writings, Choba is the name of a certain level of impurity called Choba. Choba, it's a negative word because it comes from the word Hayav. Hayav is what? Guilty, obligated. So there is certain negative connotation to that topic. But we're not going to go into the depth of the deeper meaning of the word Choba. Let's just take it by the face value. So comes the Gemara in Masechet Hulin, and it says, Mayim Aharonim Choba. it's mandatory to do Mayim Aharonim. And the question is, why? When it comes to washing of the hands before making the beracha of hamotzi, we don't say netilat yadayim hoba. I don't even say hanahat tefillin hoba. I don't say hanahat tefillin is mandatory. I know hanahat there is a mitzvah to put on tefillin. I don't say kebi'ut mezuzah hoba. Placing a mezuzah, it's mandatory. So why do I say Mayim Aharonim hoba? Why is the mandatory fits into the Mayim Aharonim? You think everybody does Mayim Aharonim? Don't answer. And there are in certain communities that they never took upon themselves to do Mayim Aharonim. Those who know, especially in the Sephardic world, etc., there is a concept of Mayim Aharonim is part of our protocol, and according to some Sephardic poskim, even ladies need to do Mayim Aharonim, are required to do Mayim Aharonim, even though this may be a shocker to many. And I repeat what I always say: I'm not telling to change people's life. I'm only sharing information. You do with it whatever you want. You check, as I always say, check with your local rabbi. Okay? I only share the information. I'm like the Rabbi Google. I share information. You do with it. The only difference is that you can trust me more than you trust Google. Many times the doctor says, stop looking at the internet. Stop looking at Google. Because Hakam Dr. Google, Hakam Google, somebody call him Hakam Google, which sounds cute. Okay? But if I know Google, go to the supermarket and buy Google in honor of Shabbat. But the question is, why the Gemara brings this concept that Mayim Aharonim carries a weight? So the Gemara explains even more. It says, Mayim Aharonim et notlim ella bekeli. It says, when you do Mayim Aharonim, don't spill the water on the ground. The Gemara says, en notlim ella bekeli, en notlim al gave karka. It says, when you do Mayim Aharonim, two things. Number one, opinion says, make sure it doesn't go to the ground. Now you need to remember, the ground back then in the Gemara, what was it? Earth, sand. So you don't want the ground to absorb the water of Tum'ah. That's what he's saying. And so what do you do in Aharonim? In a keli. And that's why you go to any Judaica store, and what do you buy? Mayim Aharonim kit. Or you go to the sink, and you do Mayim Aharonim. And it says, there is one more thing, that you should not do Mayim Aharonim ella besonen rather. Cold water. Why? Mipene shehamim me'afefim et hayadayim ve'en ma'avirim et hazohama. The language of the Gemara says, because the hot water seems to have certain influence on the skin of the person and does not remove the zohama. What's the zohama? In Kabbalistic terms, zohama is tum'ah, impurity. Now, what impurity are we talking about? What, because I ate sambusak, I ate a sandwich, I ate food, suddenly my hands are impure? So there are a few answers to the question. To answer the question number one, or the answer number one to the question rather, is how did the person eat? There are two ways of eating. Yaakov Avinu, Esav. Don't answer. Yaakov ונתן לי לחם לאכול ובגד ללבוש. I'm happy, זהו זה. עשיו, הלעיתני נא מן האדום הזה. It says, pour it directly in my throat. That's the meaning of al-aiteni. Say, what are you going to use a plate? I'm going to eat the entire tray. That's it. Min ha'adom. It says adom. Since when the lentils are red? It says very simple. He was so desperate that he was not willing to wait until they are cooked. So let me have them. You know, you go to a restaurant, right? And you ask for a rib steak. How many options do they give you, right? Rare, medium rare, well done, whatever. Yeah, raw. He says, I want it raw. Why? And that's why when the Gemara talks about meat, there is one way of cooking the meat. It's called benderosai, the meat of the gangsters, of the criminals. Now, what is the meat of the criminals? It says the criminals were always in a rush, so they barely cooked the meat. So it was less or maximum to a third of the required cooking, because they were afraid to be caught up, so they will eat fast. Amavdil. Isav was the same. That's how Isav ate. So there are two ways of eating, Isav or Yaakov. So when a person eats like Isav, Raftan, yani like a vacuum cleaner, that brings already tum'ah to the hands. That's right. Lack of. And that's the spirituality number one of Mayim Aharonim from the deeper side of the view of Mayim Aharonim. Then there is the next one. The Gemara talks about, it says, Mipene ma amru Mayim Aharonim Chova. Why the Hachamim made such a strong statement on the Mayim Aharonim requirement? שמלח סדומית יש, שמסמא את הידיים, מחילה, שמסמא את העיניים. The Gemara says, there is a certain type of salt that comes from Sedom. Remember Sedom? How was Sedom destroyed? Gofrit b'melach. So the salt of Sedom is dangerous, is poison. So poisonous is the salt of Sedom that if the salt touches the fingertips of the person and the person rubs their eyes, blinds their eyes. So now, if that's the case, so Mayim Aharonim, besides the spiritual explanation, there is something simpler, physical danger. Blindness. If that's the case, if the danger of the salt can hurt the eyesight of the person, so the halakha then says there is no difference between a male or a female. Blindness is the same. So then what do we understand from this Gemara? Putting on the side the Kabbalistic meaning of the Mayim Aharonim protocol, that we have a pikuach nefesh protocol to avoid danger to the person's life or to the eyesight. Once there is a fear of a side effect physically, so then it became chovah. It became mandatory. It's not optional. It's mandatory. Now, wait, I'm not done yet. So it says that, and some hold like this, that today we do not have salt from Sedom. If we ask the audience, where is Sedom? What? No, Sedom. Right, in Israel. How do you call it in English, Yam HaMelech? The Dead Sea. The Dead Sea. Sí, one more. That's it. Thank you. Yes, I knew that answer. Thank you. Not in Rome. It's in Israel. Now, you go to, right, you go to Israel, you're going to pick up salt and you're going to make a mochi. This is salt from Sedom? Obviously not. But, and that's the reason why some say today doesn't apply. But on the other hand, if the halakha brings it down, it means that there is something deeper than just the geographical location of the source. And I'm going to speak about it, but I'm going to close the book. According to our Hachamim, the concept of Mayim Aharonim is connected to Emunah. Emunah. Now you may ask, what has to do Emunah with Mayim Aharonim? Now remember what the Gemara said in the name of Rabbi Hiya. Amar Rabbi Hiya, Mayim Aharonim Chova, Mipnei shemesameh et ha'inayim. The eyes, there are two different types of eyes. Is the eye of the person, your own eyes. Each person has a different color, different eyesight, etc. That's our own eyes. But then there is a different type of eye. The Mishnah calls it the third eye, Ain Ro'ah. When we say Ain Ro'ah, you have the camera there. Okay, that's Ain Ro'ah. Hamavdil means Shamayim. But there is a different type of eye or eyes, and are the Hachamim of Am Israel. How the Hachamim of Am Israel are called? Einei Ha'edah, the eyes of Am Israel. So when the Gemara says Mesameh Ta'inayim, if a person says, I don't need to do my Maharonim, so this person is deactivating Emunat Hachamim. So if Emunat Hachamim is deactivated, Emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu will also become deactivated. So somebody listening to what I just said may say, Rabbi, I think you're going overboard. How can you say by deactivating Emunah in the Hachamim, you are deactivating Emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Are you comparing the Hachamim to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The answer is yes. It's a pasuk in the Torah. Vayaminu b'Hashem Moshe Abdo. Torah puts Emunah in Moshe Rabbeinu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, same pasuk. Vayamen ha'am. The nation believe. So there is a direct connection in the topic of Emunah. That's what the great Kedushat Levi writes in the powerful prayer that thousands of people recite in their homes on Mosai Shabbat. Elokei Abraham, Elokei Ishak, Elokei Yaakov. One of the things that a person prays for is to have Emunat Hachamim. And we use the Hachamim as a vehicle to help us enhance our Emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's no brainer. It's no brainer. When we have Emunah in Hachamim, that reinforces Emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is something that we are about to do tonight, tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, Melave Malka. Doesn't matter. Listen, even if one person takes upon themselves to start doing Mayim Aharonim based on today's class, for sure it's going to be a great zachut for Am Israel. So whoever does it, Tabo Alechem Beracha, continue Be'ezat Hashem. I hope that this gave you and gave us, all of us, a deeper insight of what makes this particular Gemara in Masechet Hulin very interesting, very powerful. And Be'ezat Hashem, At the end of the day, there is a pasuk in Yeshaya Navi, I believe, that says, "Vehayu einecha ro'ot et morecha." In English means, "Vehayu einecha." Again, the eyes. Let your eyes see the hachamim. Ro'ot et morecha. Who is morecha? The hachamim. That's what it means. Vehayu einecha ro'ot et morecha. I had to give a speech yesterday in the school. They invited me, "Rabbi, it's the last day of school. Are you able to come and say a few words to the middle school?" I said, "Of course, why not? Let me finish the class. Let me take care of a few things. I'll be there." And I was sharing with them a beautiful message. And then at the end, they started to ask questions. And what was the message that they got from me? Something related to part of what we just discussed in the last few moments. The concept of a person not being embarrassed or shy to ask questions. Because sometimes not knowing the answer may deter the person of doing something that they want to do. You understand? That's the reason why the Mishnah says, "Lo abaishan, lomed." And then I added one more thing, the concept of Emunat Hachamim. Thousands of people do this all over the world. Doesn't matter on your level of observance. How many times people go through all kinds of scenarios, situations, challenges, and what they do, they go to a certain Hakam. If it's in Israel, if it's in America, whatever, what part of the world, Hakam, I need a blessing. Hakam, I need a prayer. Hakam, I need refuah shlema, etc. Why? Because there is an emunah peshuta, the way the Baal Shem Tov talks about the simplicity of a Jew. Somebody said the simplicity of a Jew, and I think the Baal Shem Tov or other Hasidic master says a Jew is not simple. A Jew is an ambassador of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm talking about the spiritual aspect, not talking about physical or finances. That's not the main topic of today. Is the essence of what the Yehudi represents, what the Neshama represents, the potential of a Yehudi. Sometimes I talk to rabbis and I talk to people and I talk to young rabbis involved in kiruv, in outreach, right? And they tell me stories that if you will hear them, you would ask, how can you deal with this kind of such a crazy scenarios? And I'm not going to tell them over, but I do know some extreme scenarios that you say, Ribono shel olam. Like many people for many years says, Harvard. Today to say Harvard is nibul peh, lashon hara. Right? Out, Rahet, and company, and many more are coming. Just stay tuned. Whatever. Okay? Anyways, so I asked this rabbi, how do you handle this? It says, I put in my mind that I'm not dealing with a person. I'm dealing with a neshama. A neshama that needs rehab. Let's call it. A neshama that needs TLC. A neshama that needs a couple of vitamins, nurturing, nursing, all connected to the spiritual way. And once we understand, it's like there was a story. I'll tell you, I finished with a cute story. There was a fellow, a very wealthy man, who went to a rabbi. And he asked the rabbi, Rabbi, why you waste your time with simple Jews? That's what the fellow said. So the rabbi asked him, what business are you in? He says, I deal with diamonds. Okay, do you have a pouch with diamonds? Sure. He pulls out his pouch. I have one on me, I think. True story, by the way. I have it. Better than diamonds. It's a holy coin. Sure. Not available. You got also? So I'm not the only one. I'm so happy. You remind me of the story. You know what happened? Let me finish the first story, then I'm going to tell you another story. So the rabbi says, "Can I see the diamonds?" Opens the pouch and puts 20, 30 diamonds. And the rabbi picks one. I like this, I like this, I like this. The fellow says, "Rabbi, I'm sorry. You picked the worst." Say, "How can you say that? They are the biggest." So the fellow says, "The biggest in diamond is not always the best. You see this one, you see these two are better than the three that you selected." And this fellow says, to pick a diamond, you need to understand about diamonds. And the rabbi said, to talk about the Jewish people, you need to be an expert about the topic of the neshamot. Can I have your pouch? No, I'm going to tell you a story. You have it? Okay. So we have here 2 pouches for the audience. 2 pouches. Both of them have things inside. You can take it back. I don't want to throw it. It could be very valuable. Why did I ask him to show me his pouch? Is because one time there was a fellow who owned generation after generation a coin dated to the time of the Bet HaMikdash. And somehow the coin was lost, got lost. There was a wedding, got lost. He's looking for the coin. I don't find it. I don't find it. And what happened? They make an announcement. No one is able to leave the social hall. Everyone will be searched and checked because it's something that is priceless. And they start looking and they don't find anything. They said, "We're going to check again." One of the fellows protests and he says, "No, no." They check again. They check by the 3rd time. And every time they wanted to check, the same fellow will make a big deal out of it. "You're embarrassing us. What are you doing? You're wasting our time." Finally, after the 3rd time, they found the coin. Big simcha. Everybody was happy, especially the owner. He left her inside the koracha and he forgot. Simple. Okay? But in the meantime, 200 people were delayed. An unhappy fellow. So at the end, when everybody was leaving, one of the rabbis in the audience asked this fellow that was always complaining and screaming, "Why did you make such a big deal? What's the problem?" You know what the fellow says? "Because I have the same coin." Says, "How come?" He pulls out his packet, the pouch. "Rabbi, I have the same coin. If they're going to start checking me and they're going to find the coin, what people are going to say? You took it. Nobody would have believed me if I say, no, this is my coin. This is one of a kind." That's why I wanted to show it to the audience, to show the 2 pouches. Although my pouch, I think, is a better looking, but it's smaller. Yours is bigger. Yours is, and it felt heavier than mine. I don't know what's inside there, but looked very interesting. I felt it. Don't worry. You should get it appraised and insured, by the way. Thank you, Rohi. Okay, my good friends, let's hope and pray to have great news from Eretz Israel. And Mosai Shabbat is coming. Eliyahu Navi comes on Mosai Shabbat. Who knows? Maybe we'll be heading to Eretz Israel any moment now. Amen. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen. Rabbi Hananiah ben Akashia אומר, צעק הקדוש ברוך הוא